You really think running off to this cabin changes anything, Emily? You are still the same selfish girl who never learned to put family first. Your husband came to me in tears because you refused to be generous with your time or your heart. I had to tell the others the truth so they could help save what is left of this marriage. I offered to pay for this whole trip out of the kindness of my heart. And this is how you repay me, by hiding in the woods like a sulking child. Those private messages you sent him were never meant to stay secret once you decided to shut everyone out. Sometimes love means sharing the burden with people who actually care. If you had simply been more generous with your support, instead of hoarding every little hurt, we would not have had to step in and fix this family ourselves. Hi, my name is Emily Harper. I am 30 years old. I stood frozen on the back porch of the old Michigan cabin, the screen door still half open behind me. The October air bit through my sweater, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. My phone sat on the kitchen counter inside speaker mode, still active from the call I had taken earlier. I had stepped out for 2 minutes of quiet. 2 minutes was all it took for my mother-in-law Carolyn to say everything I was never supposed to hear. My husband Michael had left the phone on speaker. He always did that when he talked to her. I used to think it was harmless. Now I knew it was how they kept me out of their real conversations. The core secret they had been protecting was not just about money or time. It was about control dressed up as generosity. Carolyn had spent years telling everyone in her circle a carefully edited version of our family story. In her version, Michael was the long-suffering husband married to a fragile, difficult woman who refused to open up. She had leaked pieces of my private emails and messages to her church friends and a couple of cousins, always framing it as concern. The goal was simple: make me look unstable so no one would question why she and Michael kept making decisions for me. I had discovered the email thread by accident 2 nights before we left for the cabin. Michael had left his laptop open on the kitchen table while he went to take a shower. An old thread from 3 years ago sat right there in his sent folder, never deleted. In it, he had forwarded private messages I had sent him during a rough patch after my second miscarriage. Carolyn had replied with suggestions on how to handle me, including sharing just enough with the right people so they would understand why Michael sometimes needed space. She called it being generous with the truth. That thread was still there, every word, every suggestion, every casual cruelty wrapped in the language of love and family duty. We had come to the cabin because Michael's job had suddenly ended. The company he worked for let him go with almost no warning. The stress had been crushing both of us. Carolyn had generously offered to cover the cabin rental for a long weekend so we could reset as a family. I had agreed because I was exhausted and wanted to believe she was trying to help. The drive up from our home in Grand Rapids had already been tense. Michael and I argued the entire last hour about whether I was being too closed off with his mother. He accused me of punishing her for caring. I accused him of choosing her comfort over mine every single time. By the time we pulled into the gravel driveway, neither of us was speaking. Now standing on that porch, I understood why the argument had felt so scripted. They had already decided how this weekend would go. I was supposed to break down, apologize for being difficult, and let Carolyn fix me in front of whoever she decided to invite up later. I walked back inside quietly. Michael and Carolyn were still in the living room. She was pouring herself a glass of wine like she owned the place. Michael looked tired but relieved, like a problem had just been solved for him. I picked up my phone from the counter and ended the speaker call without a word. Neither of them noticed. That night, I lay awake in the small bedroom while Michael slept beside me. I kept seeing the email thread in my mind. The way Carolyn had written, she just needs to understand that real family shares everything, even the ugly parts. The way Michael had replied, I know, I just don't know how to make her see it without another fight. They had been having this conversation for years. I had simply never been invited into it. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee. Carolyn was already up, sitting at the small kitchen table with her laptop open. She smiled at me like nothing had happened. Sleep well, sweetheart, she asked. You looked so peaceful when I checked on you last night. I did not answer. I poured my coffee and walked out onto the porch again. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady when I finally spoke. I heard you last night, I said. Carolyn did not even flinch. She took a slow sip of her coffee and set the mug down. Good, she said. Then maybe we can finally have an honest conversation instead of you pretending everything is fine when it clearly is not. Michael came out a minute later, rubbing his eyes. He stopped when he saw both of us. What's going on? He asked. I looked at him for a long moment. The man I had married 3 years ago? The man who had held me after every loss and promised we would face everything together? The man who had forwarded my most private pain to his mother so she could help him manage me? I found the email thread, I said quietly. The one from 3 years ago. The one you never deleted. Michael's face went pale. Carolyn reached over and patted his arm like she was comforting a child. Michael was only trying to protect you, she said. You were in such a dark place. He needed someone to talk to who understood how to handle these things. I felt something inside me shift. Not anger exactly, something colder and clearer. You leaked my private messages to your friends at church, I said. You told them I was unstable? You made them think I was the problem so they would feel sorry for Michael? Carolyn's smile did not waver. I did what any mother would do when her son is suffering, she said. I was generous with my time and my wisdom. You should be thanking me instead of acting like a victim. Michael stayed silent. He would not look at me. That was the moment I understood the full picture. The controlled narrative they had built was never going to collapse on its own. They needed me to keep playing my part, the difficult wife who needed fixing, the one who was never generous enough. I walked back inside, packed my bag, and called my friend Amanda Torres. She answered on the second ring. I need a place to stay for a few days, I said. Can I come to your house in Kalamazoo? Amanda did not ask questions. She just said yes. I left the cabin without another word to either of them. Michael followed me to the car but did not try to stop me. Carolyn stood on the porch watching arms cross the picture of wounded generosity. On the drive south, I cried until I could not see the road. Not because I had lost them, because I finally understood I had never really had them in the first place. The family stories I thought I was protecting by staying quiet had been rewritten long ago without my permission. I stayed with Amanda for 4 days. She helped me find a therapist and a lawyer. The lawyer looked at the email thread and the messages Carolyn had sent to her circle. She told me I had options, but none of them would be clean or painless. When I finally went back to the house to get the rest of my things, Michael was there alone. Carolyn had gone back to her own home. He looked smaller than I remembered. I never wanted it to go this far, he said. I believed him. That made it worse. I know, I answered. But you let it. I took what was mine and left. No big confrontation, no dramatic speech, just the quiet closing of a door that had already been rotting for years. Carolyn tried to call a few times after that. I never answered. She left voicemails about how I was throwing away my marriage and hurting Michael, how I was being ungrateful for all the help she had tried to give. I deleted every message without listening to the end. 3 months later, I received a letter from her in the mail. It was long and carefully written. She said she was sorry if I had misunderstood her intentions. She said family should be able to work through anything if people were willing to be generous with forgiveness. I burned the letter in the sink and washed the ashes down the drain. Some losses do not come with justice or dramatic payback. Sometimes the only victory is realizing you no longer have to carry stories that were never yours to begin with. The family history Carolyn had been protecting was built on the parts of me she could control and the parts she could erase. I let it go. Not because I stopped caring, because I finally understood that protecting my dignity was the only inheritance worth keeping. After I burned the letter, the silence in my kitchen felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. The ashes swirled down the drain and took the last polite version of my mother-in-law with them. What remained was the truth I had been carrying alone for years. She and my husband had been rewriting me in real time, and they had used the language of generosity to do it. I went back to my classroom the next Monday because third graders do not care about your broken marriage. They care about whether you remembered the gold stars and whether you will listen to their story about the lizard they found in the backyard. I smiled through spelling tests and tied shoes and pretended the ground under my feet was still steady. It was not. That same afternoon, Amanda Torres called again. She had found a therapist who worked with women whose families had turned their private pain into public stories. Her name was Lena Morales. I almost said no. Therapy had always felt like another thing I would be asked to apologize for later, but Amanda's voice was steady in a way mine was not. Just go once, she said. If it feels wrong, you never have to go back. I went. Lena's office smelled faintly of lavender and old books. She did not rush me. I laid the printed email thread on the small table between us. She read every line without changing expression. When she finished, she set the pages down gently as if they were fragile. This is not generosity, she said. This is strategic control dressed up as care. Your mother-in-law gained access to your most private moments and then used them to shape how other people saw you. Your husband let it happen because it was easier than standing between you and the story she wanted to tell. The words did not comfort me. They named something I had felt for years but never said out loud. I had spent 3 years telling myself that my mother-in-law was just old-fashioned and protective. Hearing it called what it actually was made the air in the room feel thinner. Lena asked what I wanted for myself, not what I thought I owed anyone. I told her I wanted to stop being the difficult character in someone else's story. That night, I went through the rest of the shared cloud account my husband had never bothered to lock down. There were more threads. One from last year where my mother-in-law had written that I was still carrying the damage from a broken home and that perhaps having a child would finally settle me. My husband had replied with a simple thank you and a promise to keep trying to get through to me. He never once told her to stop. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room until the streetlights came on. The controlled narrative had never been about one email. It had been a long, patient project. 2 days later, the story reached my school. Mrs. Patel, whose daughter was in my class, waited until the other parents had left to pick up. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. I don't mean to overstep, she said, but Carolyn mentioned at the women's group that you and Michael have been struggling because you refuse to accept help. She said your own family history made you closed off. If you need anything, I thanked her and smiled the way I had been trained to smile. When she walked away, I went straight to the staff bathroom, locked the door, and stood there until the bell rang for the next class. My hands would not stop shaking. That evening, I called Lena from the school parking lot. She is still talking, I said. She is still shaping how people see me. Lena was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do with that information? She asked. I did not know yet, but I knew I could no longer pretend it was harmless. The following week, I met with Mark Ellison, the lawyer Amanda had recommended. He read the email thread and the later messages without commentary. When he finished, he looked at me directly. You have grounds for legal separation, he said. Privacy violation, emotional manipulation through third parties, and a documented pattern. It will not be clean. It will cost you some relationships and some stories you thought belonged to you. But it is a choice you can make. I left his office with a folder of papers and a deadline. Signing them would draw a line I could not undraw. It would mean telling the parents at my school that, yes, there were problems. It would mean losing the photo albums my mother-in-law had kept in her basement for years, the ones that held the only pictures of our early marriage, and the holidays we had spent at the cabin. She had always said she would make copies when she had time. She never had. Now I understood why. Those images were part of the leverage. Michael came to the house the night before I was scheduled to sign. He looked smaller than I remembered. I did not know she was still talking to people after the cabin, he said. I thought it stopped. I showed him the newer messages. He read them in silence. I'm sorry, he said at last. You should have stopped it the first time she asked for my private words, I answered. He nodded. There was nothing else left to say between us. The next morning, I signed the separation papers in Mark's office. 3 signatures. Each one felt like cutting a thread I had been gripping since the day we got married. Mark did not offer platitudes. He simply slid the copies across the desk and told me to call if anything changed. That night, the breakdown I had been holding back finally arrived. I sat on the floor of the living room with my back against the wall and cried until my voice gave out. I cried for the babies I never got to bring home. I cried for the version of myself that had believed staying quiet and being generous would eventually earn me safety. I cried for the family stories and photographs that now lived in someone else's basement and had been twisted into reasons why I was the problem. When the tears stopped, the house was quiet in a way it had never been while I was still trying to fix us. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. For the first time, the silence did not feel like a threat I had to manage. My mother-in-law called one last time the following week. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something in me needed to hear how the story ended. Emily, she said, her voice soft and wounded. I heard you filed papers. I hope you know this is not what I wanted. I was only trying to help Michael understand what he was dealing with. Your family history, the way you were raised, it made you closed off. I was trying to protect him from carrying that same damage into your marriage. There it was. The final piece. She had not only leaked my current pain, she had rewritten my past, telling people that my own family was broken, and that was why I could not give my husband the life he deserved. She had turned my history into her justification. I did not argue. I did not defend the family I came from. I am done letting you write my story, I said. Do not call me again. I ended the call before she could answer. In the months that followed, the controlled narrative collapsed in small, uneven ways. Some people stopped asking about Michael. A few women from the church group reached out privately to say they had felt uncomfortable with how much Carolyn shared. But there was no public reckoning. No one returned the stories she had taken and twisted. I never received the photo albums or the holiday invitations. Those pieces of inherited memory stayed with her. What I gained was quieter and harder to measure. I no longer measured every sentence I spoke in case it was used against me later. I no longer pretended that generosity meant handing people the key to my pain. I started new traditions that belonged only to me. Sunday coffee with Amanda, solo hikes on the weekends, a small Christmas tree with only the ornaments I chose. Lena once told me that protecting your dignity does not always look like winning. Sometimes it looks like walking away with less than you started with and discovering that less is still more than you had while you were being rewritten. I think she was right. I still teach third grade. I still answer when Amanda calls. The cabin in Michigan is just a place on a map now. The stories my mother-in-law tried to own are fading at the edges. Some days the ache of what I lost still surfaces, but it no longer defines the shape of my days. I chose myself, not because it was easy or because it came with a satisfying ending, because staying would have cost me the only thing that was ever truly mine to protect. Thank you for listening to my story. If this helped you see that protecting your dignity is not selfish, even when it means losing people and pieces of the past you once thought you needed, comment healing below. What is one story you are ready to stop letting someone else write for you?